Welcome to the Hank Cisco Show. And I have to apologize. I woke up this morning, I don't have a voice. So my guest today is going to have to do most of the talking. So my guest today is a good friend of mine. I've known him for years, in my years with the Norristown Police Department. And his name is Charles N. Sweeney, okay? And he's a fire marshal for Norristown. And you know how important the fire marshal is in the community. He's also commander of the Veteran Farm War Post 1804. And so the fact that today is Veterans Day, we're going to start off talking about our fire safety and also about Veterans Day. So, Charlie, tell me something about yourself. You know, a lot of people say, well, the fire marshal, but let's get behind the fire marshal. Who are you? I picked up the newspaper today to find out who you are. Yesterday's Times Herald. So tell me something about yourself.
All right, well, Hank and I go back, I guess, back to Hartran.
Wow.
Elementary. I was part of the safety patrol there, and Hank was in charge of the safety patrol back then. So that's when my dealing started with Hank Cisco. I guess it's back in the 50s. So whether Hank remembers his days, I surely do.
I remember the safety patrols, but your name's not on my list as being delinquent. I was a juvenile officer, so you must have did a good job.
I must have been a good guy, but, hopefully anyway.
But I think that training of being a safety, I think a safety patrol in school, I think helps a kid, you know, and your background is fire marshal and also in the military. Right. So that being a safety patrol, I think sort of helped you a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah, it was an inspiration, I guess, to grow up to be an individual that I am today. So, you know, and you're part of that. So I just thank you for that.
Now, you live in Norristown, right?
I've lived in Norristown all my life.
Yeah.
I grew up on the 700 block of Cone Street. That my family actually goes back into the mid-1800s as being in Norristown.
Oh, okay.
And always lived on the Cone Street, actually from the 500 block to the 600 block to the 700 block. So back in the days, that area in Norristown was always the Irish immigrants.
Right.
And there was a lot of Irish on the 700 block
right.
of Cone Street.
East End was Italian, so it's just kind of mixed. Norristown, well, we're the largest burr in the world. I used to, when I travel in my police functions, and I'd get up, and one guy would say he's a captain or a superintendent, and I say, Norristown, the largest burr in the world. You know, I give it a title.
Right.
Say, but
yeah, well, that's where it all started as far as even being a firefighter. My grandfather lived on the 700 block of Cone Street, and he was a member of the Fairmount Engine Company #2. And,
which one?
Fairmount.
Fairmount. That's
located at
Main
Astor and Main.
Main and Astor, okay.
Right. And I have pictures of me on a ladder with a fire hat on, you know, when I was probably around 5 or 6 years old.
How about that?
So
I wish you had them. We'd have shown them here.
You know, when I became of age, I actually joined the fire company when I was 18, back in 1965, 1966. That's when I joined the fire department. And I've been a member of the Norristown Fire Department ever since.
And Norristown's in good shape as far as the fire companies. I think we got one of the best now.
We have, in Montgomery County, we have the finest fire department, in my opinion, that one community could have. It's versatile. It's actually comprised of career personnel and volunteer. We have members of Local 2335, International Association of Firefighters, that man 2 of the stations in Norristown, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We work on a rotating basis of 2 10-hour days, 2 14-hour nights, and 2 days off. So that's the career firefighters. Career firefighters are supplemented by a volunteer force. And the volunteers are trained.
Well, at Norristown, are we all volunteer? How's that work?
No, it's part. It's what they call a combination fire department.
Oh, okay.
Where you have career and volunteers.
Okay.
And you know, the volunteers. When I was a volunteer back in starting in the 60s and 70s, we had maybe 300 calls a year. All right, that's exceeded 1,000 now a year. So back then, when it was 300 calls, it was very easy. You know, it was easier for an individual to give up his free time to go and help his fellow man by fighting fires. Today, with the over 1,000 calls, it's almost next to impossible for everybody to make the calls.
Charlie, I think firemen were appreciated, but I don't think they were appreciated as much until it was focused and put light on it is 9/11/01. That is when the appreciation of seeing film of that disaster in New York City is where people start saying, hey, look, the firemen, we didn't realize they endangered their life going in to the buildings, burning buildings to save people.
Right.
But we've been fortunate here in Norristown,
Right.
haven't we?
The firefighters and the police officers, I really feel that didn't get their credit due until 9/11. And it's unfortunate because on a daily basis, they put their lives on the line. And it wasn't until the 9/11 that I actually saw a change in people. Everything from the person on the street that would wave to you up to the Superior Court judges that would welcome you into the courtroom, which we never had before.
Yeah.
All right. So it really gave us, it brought us to the surface as being a viable
Good morale
part
booster, too. Gives you that, zip.
right, of the community. I mean, we're a necessity. We're there to fight their fires. We're there to fight their crime. All right. And also the EMS, the emergency services people with the ambulance. They never got their credit due then until 9/11 either.
And the police and fire work hand in hand. And I remember in Philadelphia when they had the problems down there that Mayor Rizzo was mayor at the time, when the firemen, were up in the front, and I think a couple of them got shot, got wounded or so. So whenever there's a disaster of some kind, the police and firemen work together, even in time of danger,
Exactly right.
So I'm satisfied. I still live in Norristown, and I appreciate the fire company ever since I was raised right near one, the Norris Firehouse. I was on Chestnut Street,
Okay.
and I appreciate that. But what are some of the advances since you became chief of the, fire marshal? What have we added to, and what do we need? I like to find out something that we don't have. Is there something that we should have that we don't have?
I tell you what, the way that the profession of the firefighter has evolved from back when I was a volunteer back in the 60s. Back then, what we did is when we went into a burning building, we actually put hankies over our faces.
Oh,
which would, hopefully keep the smoke from going into your lungs. Since then, it's actually progressed to now where we actually wear self-contained breathing apparatus. It's a 30-minute bottle of just compressed air. It's not oxygen. Compressed air you put on your back, and you're able to breathe in a hazardous environment, such as a fire. So that was one of the big things that allowed us to actually fight fires better than we do. The clothing the individuals have. When I started, they had rubberized coats that did nothing more than kept you dry. Now they have different types of equipment that and actual firefighting gear made out of a material that keeps the heat from penetrating the surface of the coat and the pants, and at the same time allows the interior or inside of the coat to breathe. So it makes you comfortable while you're fighting in hostile environments. So these are the type of things, and as well as hose lines being more efficient and more efficient equipment. Instead of an axe, they have power saws.
Right. Oh, I see.
So things like that.
What's that thing about Jewels of Life? That's something I remember when I think I was working in the district attorney's office at the time.
Yeah, the Hearst tool is what actually it started with a Hearst tool, which is and they called it Model 32. It's a 32-inch spread. It's actually a piece of equipment that was developed by the Hearst company that was known for Hearst shifters back in the day for cars, automobiles. And the company decided they were going to be using some of their hydraulic equipment and see if they can use it to maybe pry open a door, pop out a window, things like that. So they come up with this Hearst tool. And now it's called the Jaws of Life, and you can find different manufacturers that make the same thing, but it actually enables a firefighter to take the vehicle, if there's a vehicle accident, take the vehicle away from the victim. instead of taking the victim away from the vehicle, which it helps save lives. It definitely has done that. And I've seen it through my history of being with the party.
I thought that
numerous
was,
times.
you don't realize when you get to the scene. I remember with the police department, we had an accident at Forest and Main Street, and fellow was jammed in there, and we had to use our hands to pull it, and it was pretty tough. When you get to the scene, you didn't have gloves and stuff like that. But now with the jaw, you put it in there, and boom, you just open, get the person out. That's a great
So
invention.
that's one of the things over
Features.
the years that helps save lives is the Hearth tool. And when you're looking at the prevention of fires, which is basically one of my jobs as a fire marshal, we try to identify the problem areas in town and what is the biggest cause of fires. And right now in Norristown is actually somebody leaving an unattended pot of food on the stove. That is actually one of the biggest problems we have. People falling asleep, not paying attention, whatever it is, allowing a pan to heat up to the point to where it ignites. And after it ignites...
That's one of the key things, one of the key problems?
One of the key problems we have. As a matter of fact, we had one last week that a woman that got burned out of her home. And she noticed that she had a fire on the stove, and what she did was she went and got a bowl full of flour and tried to put the fire out with that. Well, you don't put a fire out with flour, because that's combustible.
That'll burn.
And she says, I never saw such a fire after I put that on. It just flared up on me.
Oh, God.
Baking soda is what
She thought maybe smothering it.
Yeah, baking soda is what you use if you want
Baking soda.
if you want to smother it. But flour is just putting like paper on that.
Hey, we ought to make Emerald, the guy that does the cooking, we ought to make him not volunteer, but the honorary fire chief, and he should be talking about that. Don't leave the pot on the stove.
Exactly right, but that's the biggest problem we have.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's careless smoking. I mean, that does cause problems, but the biggest one is unattended
But there's more
cooking.
people cooking than smoking.
Right.
So the danger is there. Now, I picked up yesterday's Times Herald, and that's why you're here today as my guest, and today is Veterans Day, and and it's an article here and I didn't know that you were commander of the Veteran Farm War Post, 1804. How do you pronounce that?
1804.
Would
Yeah,
be the one, or
exactly right.
1804.
1804.
1804. And it tells here, now your other life growing up, okay, from a safety patrol to the service and fire marshal, Now, tell me this, I saw this article here about that you were a sergeant and you were replacing sergeants that were either getting transferred or getting killed or injured, and you were at Vietnam. But before we go to that, last night they had a vigil at the Main and Swede.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. You there? I couldn't make it because I was
Yeah,
on all cylinders.
I was honored last night to attend the ceremony that commemorated the people, the servicemen that actually died in the line of duty in Vietnam, and it went through all years. It started with 1965,
Okay.
and went up to 1975. I was honored enough to place a flag for the individuals that died in 1971.
They read the names off?
Yeah, once you put your flag up, which I did, they read the names out of all the individuals that died within that year.
That's
And last night, if those who never attended before, you'll see from 1968 to 1970, that is the period of time where most of your soldiers died in Vietnam. It's because of the escalation of the war. And as the war de-escalated into the 70s, you see less and less names. So it really hits home when you actually hear the reading of the names and how many service people died. Over 58,000 total died in the line of duty in Vietnam.
the other article I enjoyed when I read the Times Herald, and said here that you went in training, you got 17 weeks training, and what they call it, shake and bake. In other words, give you a fast training.
Yeah, well, actually, we had, and I'll go through from basic training on to where I got overseas. When you go into the Army, I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina after being, I was inducted back in, I think, 601 North Broad Street in Philly. That's where I actually went into the service. I was drafted. okay, like a lot of us.
Right.
That time. And I went into the service as just a private. You have one stripe on your arm. And you go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for your basic training. That's 8 weeks of intensive training at that point. It was like they take you down to nothing and build you back up again. And that's
Right.
what the purpose of basic
But
training is.
yeah.
Everybody's equal when you come out here.
Right.
And I might say that that was probably the best physical condition I've ever been in my
Right.
life. You know, I mean, I could do 500
Discipline.
push-ups without,
Right.
you know, batting an eye. Then when you leave basic training, they send you into what they call an advanced individual training, which is they put you into a category or a skill where they think you're most suited. I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I was in the Armored Reconnaissance Unit, where they taught us everything there was about recon, and that was the part of the service I was in. Once we got out of
Fast-moving training, right? Got everything right
that was
there,
another 8 weeks of training there. And then when you got out of there, they normally would ship you over to Vietnam, and you would go over as a private with 2 stripes. I was fortunate enough to be able to go through non-commissioned officers candidate school, which was also in Fort Knox, Kentucky. That was the 17 weeks of training, where they taught us everything there was about confidential clearances to allow you to see where the Vietnamese, or Viet Cong, I should say, and the North Vietnamese regulars were actually in the country, and how the tactics they used against us, so we would be able to lead our troops into battle.
Good training, right?
Excellent training.
You know the old story, an informed nation's a peaceful nation, right?
Yeah.
So you keep your
Yep, it was
informed, know
excellent
it.
training there. They taught us everything we needed to know. And then from there, they sent us to Fort Hood, Texas, where actually they put us in charge of a platoon of Vietnam returnees. And they tried to get us in tune with what it was like over there before
Right.
we would go.
You just don't walk into different customs and
Right. And
Get to
you
know
were
the
able
people.
to go and control a platoon of people
Right.
that actually was there.
you were a sergeant.
I was a sergeant at that point. When they graduate from that non-commissioned officers Canada school, you graduate as a sergeant E5.
Okay.
So I did that in 7 months.
Right.
So it's like in those days it was unheard of, somebody making sergeant in 7 months. So then I went there in Fort Hood, Texas. When I left Fort Hood, Texas, I had such such knowledge of the country, just by listening to the people that were over there, that I felt that I was really going to be an asset over there at being a sergeant. And I'll never forget the guys when I was leaving. I walked out the door, and my Vietnam returnees that were part of my platoon said, "Sergeant Sweeney, you treat the guys over there like you treated us, you're going to make it back."
Right.
And I'll always remember that.
Right.
So I treated, when I went over to...
Words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom.
Right.
When I went to Vietnam then, I had 15 days leave, went over to Vietnam. I was assigned to the 4th Infantry Division, 1st and 10th Cavalry, which was at a camp called Camp Inari, which was in Pleiku. And it was the Central Highlands of Vietnam. And it was a gorgeous country. They had everything from bananas growing on the trees to pineapples. They had monkeys. They had
No
everything.
kidding.
They had lions, tigers. They had everything over
No
there.
kidding.
So it was a gorgeous country, but it was also the time after Tet Offensive, which is when they had when they started going and attacking each one of the bases simultaneously. And I got there right after that, and there was a lot of sergeants that actually died on the battlefield,
Yeah.
which as soon as we went over, they put us right into the position of
Right,
sergeant.
and
So I was actually in charge of a recon unit. I was a scout.
you made
second
it
leader.
back.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
did.
happy for that.
Yeah, I did.
You know, the Times Herald this morning put out an article, 5 brothers in the service, Marine Corps, you know, this is unbelievable. 5 brothers in the service, and some are Vietnam, well, a couple of them in Germany, some are in the Navy, the Marines, the Army. I think that's great that we honor people that are put their life on the line. I got to apologize again. Canada's here a little cold. Woke up this morning with half a voice, and it's pretty tough when you get Cisco, can't talk, you know. and I'm glad you're doing all the talking, right? Now, I want to have you read this little thing that was in the Times Herald editorial page today about a veteran, and I thought it was great. We also had, there's an article here about our U.S. Representative Gerlach about that Veterans Day. So I'm seeing the people are starting to, recognize and appreciate people that dedicate their lives for saving somebody else's life. So, because the veteran, we'll put our hats on, okay? I'm a member of the Catholic War Vets in Norristown, so we'll put our hats on like this, okay? And I'm going to ask you to read this little poem. It's unknown who wrote it, but I thought maybe it'd be good for you to read it nice and clear.
Okay. It is a veteran, not the preacher, who has given us freedom of religion. It is a veteran, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is a veteran, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is a veteran, not the campus organizer, who has given us freedom to assemble. It is a veteran, not the lawyer, who has given us the right to a fair trial. It is a veteran, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. It says, there have been great men and great women throughout the history of our country. They have done great things, and there will be many to follow, who also will achieve greatness. However, without those brave men and women of the military, would those same people have had the opportunity to excel? We'd rather not find out. So, that is that's actually from the Times Herald. I might add, being the commander of Post 1804, we are like 377 strong. My post.
Where are you located?
Post is located at 1400 West Main Street, and actually it's in West Orange Township, right across the border. And what we do is we have different organizations within the VFW. We have the Ladies Auxiliary that actually take part and support the men. We have different committees. We have the Voice of Democracy Committee, which actually enables us to go to school districts and ask for people to give us essays on videotape, which they can actually get some sort of monetary figure or value out of it. They give us like maybe $100.
You do these things at the meetings.
We actually, no, we have different committees that are formed for that. And we are a community service organization. I mean, we're for all veterans of all wars. It's not just the Vietnam veterans. Like I work on a daily basis with Korean War veterans, World War II veterans, Persian War veterans. We just had 2 people join us, our organization, that were in Iraq. So we are always looking for veterans to help us with the organization and build it to, we've used to be 1,000 strong.
Yeah, well,
but over the years, the World War I veterans have, gone and passed away and left everything to the Korean and now the Vietnam era. People are coming up in the ranks to take that baton and run with it. So we're always looking for people to help out with the organization.
I know it's the same thing with the Catholic War Vets. Every once in a while now, you call somebody up and say, how about picking me up? I'm not feeling too well. The guys, I'm not feeling too well either, because everybody's either in rest homes or ready to go in. So it's something. But the veterans organizations have contributed a lot to every community.
Right. And the thing is, today being Veterans Day, a lot of people didn't know it as Veterans Day. It used to be called Armistice Day.
Yeah, what is that? That's
it was created back in 1918 when the actual the end of World War I. It's the 11th hour, 11th day of the 11th month. It's actually commemorates the signing of the truce between Germany and
what was
the
it called
United States.
before?
Armistice Day.
Armistice Day. Yeah, I remember they used to blow the Schmidt's Brewery all the mills used to blow their horns.
Right.
At 12 o'clock.
Yep, well, actually, 11 o'clock in the morning is
11,
when the
okay.
actual signing of it took place, so.
Well, that's, in other words, the signing of the war over, right?
Yeah, being over.
And they used to blow the horns, and there were these mills, and people would blow their
They
horns in their
celebrate
cars.
at the end of the war.
Yeah.
And that's actually, it's celebrating veterans, and that's what it's all about.
Well, let me tell you, Charlie, Charlie Sweeney, okay? I really appreciate you coming here and being my guest, and so people can get to know each other, okay? And I didn't know your background, you know, the fact that you were one of my safety patrols when I was a policeman. So, and then by reading the newspaper, I pick up here's 5 brothers in the service, you know, and the fact that last night they had this vigil, candlelight for Vietnam, and and the fact that you're a commander, you know, and the stories you have to tell, and I'm sure you have a lot more to tell, but our time is running out. But I want to thank you on Veterans Day 2003. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Thank you for the invite,
Right,
Hank. Thank
right
you.
on. Thank you, and I'll be back in about a week or so with another show. Thank you very much.